My name is Alec Rose, and what I'm about to tell you is not something I ever imagined I'd live through. Sometimes, when I think back, it almost feels like a movie, except it wasn't. It was real, it was jaw, and it left me with a memory that still keeps me awake at night. It all started on a night that should have been ordinary. One of those nights when life is supposed to go on quietly in the background. But for me, it was the night when everything began to unravel. I wasn't looking for drama. I wasn't chasing attention. I was just trying to live. And then, like a storm you never see coming, it happened. I had once been someone people admired. I had a man who promised me forever, and I believed him. I thought I had found my safe place in this world. But I was wrong. He left me. He chose another woman. And all the promises we made, all the plans we dreamed about, they scattered like ashes in the wind. And then came the announcement that made my heart drop. The wedding. His wedding. The wedding that was supposed to be mine. Do you know what it feels like to watch someone you loved so deeply walk away, only to stand at the altar with someone else? It's like your chest is caving in, like the ground beneath your feet has been pulled away. But worse than the pain was the shame. Because everyone around me knew. They saw me smiling in public, pretending I was fine, when inside, I was breaking. As the day of his wedding drew closer, I felt torn apart. Part of me wanted to hide, to disappear and never face the humiliation. But another part of me burned with something stronger, a need to stand in the storm, even if it tore me apart. I didn't know why I wanted to go. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was heartbreak. Maybe it was the hope of finding some kind of closure. But deep down, I think it was destiny pulling me there. Because what happened that night was far bigger than me. It was a week before the wedding when I first saw her. She was sitting on a cold street corner, her head lowered, her clothes torn and worn out from nights on the sidewalk. People walked past her like she didn't exist. Some even crossed to the other side of the street like she was something to be avoided, not a person to be seen. And for reasons I still can't fully explain, I stopped. I looked at her, really looked at her, and when her eyes lifted to meet mine, I saw something I'll never forget. Pain, loneliness, but also strength. The kind of strength that only comes from surviving the impossible. Something inside me shifted that moment. I couldn't just walk away. I asked myself a question I had never asked before. What would happen if I gave her a chance to be seen? Not pitied, not ignored, but truly seen. And without thinking of how people would judge me, without planning what it would mean, I asked her to come with me. Not tomorrow, not some other day, but to the very wedding that was haunting me. It sounds insane, doesn't it? A woman like her, at a wedding like that. But I didn't care. It wasn't about appearances anymore. It was about something I couldn't name. Something bigger than me. And she said yes. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur. Every time I pictured walking into that room, I felt the weight of the stairs. The whispers that would ripple through the crowd. A millionaire walking in with a homeless woman. What kind of scene would that cause? But every time doubt crept in, I remembered her eyes. I remembered that she had nothing, and yet, in her silence, she carried a dignity that no one could take away. The night of the wedding arrived like a storm cloud. I dressed in my best, the way everyone expected me to. She wore what little she had, and I could see the fear in her face, the way her hands trembled as she smoothed down her clothes. I wanted to tell her it would be okay, but even I didn't believe that. When we stepped through those doors, the world stopped. Music faltered, glasses froze mid-air, and every head turned toward us. The silence was heavy, suffocating. And then the whispers began. Quiet at first, but sharp enough to cut. People stared at her like she didn't belong. Like her very presence was an insult. But we kept walking, step by step, side by side. And as the whispers grew louder, as the laughter began to rise, something in me refused to break. I wasn't just bringing her to make a scene. I was bringing her to show the world something they never wanted to see. That worth isn't measured by wealth, beauty, or status. Still, even with that thought burning in me, I couldn't ignore the tension building in the room. Faces twisted in confusion, anger, even disgust. My ex-fiancé stood at the altar, frozen in shock, his bride's smile fading as her eyes darted between me and the woman at my side. And then, in that moment, as every eye in the room pierced through us, I realized this wasn't just my story anymore. This was hers. This was the moment that would test her, break her, or make her. And none of us, not me, not my ex, not a single soul in that room, were ready for what came next. The silence inside that room was like a blade, sharp enough to slice through skin. Every whisper, every half-hidden laugh felt like it was aimed directly at us, like arrows piercing my chest. I could hear them. Why is she here? Who is that woman with her? God, look at her clothes. They weren't even trying to hide their words anymore. The woman beside me, her name was Mariah, though no one in that room cared to ask, kept her eyes lowered. Her shoulders curled in like she was trying to make herself invisible. I felt her hand tremble as it brushed against mine, and in that instant I wanted to shield her, to wrap my arms around her and scream at every single one of them. Do you even know what this woman has been through? Do you even bite? But I didn't scream. Not yet. Instead, I walked forward, step by step, with Mariah beside me. My heels clicked against the polished floor, each sound echoing like a warning. We are here, we are not leaving, and you will see us. My ex-fiancé, Daniel, stood frozen at the altar, his bride clutching his arm as though my presence might shatter her perfect day. His face was pale, his lips parted, but no words came out. I could feel hundreds of eyes searing into us. They weren't just staring at Mariah. They were staring at me too, questioning me, judging me, waiting for me to break. And I'll be honest, part of me wanted to run. My chest tightened, my breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I thought I couldn't take it. But then, something shifted. Mariah lifted her head, just slightly, just enough. Her eyes, tired and weathered, scanned the room, and for the first time, I saw fire there. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't begging to be invisible. She was standing in the middle of a room full of people who thought they were better than her, and she was still standing. I'll never forget what happened next. The officiant cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Ladies and gentlemen," he stammered. "Perhaps we should..." But he didn't get to finish. A person in the front row, one of Daniel's business associates, suddenly spoke up. Loud, cruel, dripping with sarcasm. "Is this some kind of joke?" he said, bringing Her to a wedding like this? The words cut through the silence like glass shattering. Gasps rippled across the room. Mariah flinched, her hand twitching as though she'd just been struck. My blood boiled. Every muscle in my body screamed to lash out. But before I could even open my mouth, Daniel's bride, the woman who had taken my place, let out a bitter laugh. "She must be desperate," she said, her voice carrying across the room, dragging in street trash just to get attention. The crowd chuckled, some nervously, some with genuine cruelty. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just judgment. This was entertainment to them. They weren't simply looking down on Mariah. They were enjoying it. They were feeding off her pain like vultures circling the wounded. I could feel Mariah shrinking beside me, her body shaking. I turned to her, whispering, "Look at me. Just look at me." Her eyes met mine, glistening with unshed tears. "You don't have to be afraid," I said, my voice breaking. "Not tonight. Not with me here today." I thought maybe that would calm her, give her strength. But then another voice rang out from the back of the hall. "She doesn't belong here." The words were followed by another, sharper, colder, "Throw her out." And just like that, the room erupted. Voices overlapped, mocking, jeering, spitting out venom like a chorus of hate. "Get her out! This is a wedding, not a shelter. She's ruining everything." I stood frozen, the sound crashing over me like a tidal wave. I wanted to scream, to fight, to defend her with every ounce of strength I had. But before I could speak, Mariah straightened. Her shoulders, once curled in defeat, rose. Her chin lifted, and then she said something that silenced the entire room. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The crowd's fury rose again, louder, hotter, burning the air. "Get out! Get out!" It was no longer just words. People were standing now, pointing, sneering. Some even stepped toward us, their faces twisted with disgust. And then, something inside me snapped. I stepped forward, dragging Mariah with me, and raised my voice, louder than I'd ever spoken before in my life. "Stop!" The sound of my own voice shocked me. It echoed across the hall, slicing through the chaos for one brief, fragile moment. Eyes turned to me, faces twisted in confusion. The mob hesitated, not because they respected me, but because they hadn't expected me to fight back. And in that pause, I found my strength. "Do you even hear yourselves?" I shouted, my voice shaking with rage. "Do you hear the hatred in your words? This is supposed to be a celebration of love, but what are you showing? Nothing but cruelty, nothing but fear. And for what? Because she doesn't fit your picture-perfect world." Some faces softened with guilt. Others hardened even more. The bride's lips curled in a sneer. "You don't get to lecture us," she snapped. "You're the one who ruined everything. You brought this woman into our lives, into my wedding." Her voice dripped with venom and the crowd fed on it like starving wolves. "She doesn't belong here," another guest added. "Neither of you do," someone else muttered. My chest heaved, my heart pounding against my ribs so hard I thought it might shatter. "You think she doesn't belong?" I said, my voice lower now, trembling with emotion. I turned to Mariah, her face pale, but her eyes locked on mine. "She belongs more than any of you, because unlike you, She knows what it means to survive without anything. She knows pain. She knows hunger. She knows loss. And yet, she's still here. Still standing. That's more strength than this entire room combined. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some shifted uncomfortably, others scoffed, but no one dared interrupt me this time. For the first time, the mob was silent, not defeated, but shaken. And then Daniel spoke. His voice was soft, almost pleading. Alec, please, just go. Don't make this harder. My breath caught in my throat. His words weren't cruel like the others. They were worse. They were laced with cowardice, with surrender. He wasn't defending me. He wasn't defending Mariah. He was begging me to disappear so he wouldn't have to face the truth. I stared at him, my chest aching with 1,000 memories. Nights of promises, dreams we once shared. Love I thought was real. And now, this. A man too afraid to stand up, too weak to do what was right. Mariah's hand slipped into mine again, her grip tighter this time. Don't, she whispered. Don't let them push you. Her words lit a fire in me, a fire that burned hotter than my fear. I turned back to the crowd, my voice steady now. You want us gone? You want us silent? That's what you've always wanted, isn't it? For people like Mariah to stay hidden, to stay forgotten, so you don't have to face what's real. But not tonight. Tonight, you'll look at her. You'll see her. And you'll remember her. The bride laughed bitterly, her voice sharp as glass. You think you're making some kind of statement? No one will remember this tomorrow. You'll both go back to where you came from. One to the streets, the other to her pathetic little life. Her words stung. Not because they were true, but because I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. The cruelty she wore like a crown. But before I could respond, Mariah stepped forward. She pulled her shoulders back, lifted her chin, and spoke in a voice stronger than I'd ever heard. Maybe you'll forget me, she said. Maybe you'll forget this moment. But I won't, and neither will she. And when the day comes that everything none you built crumbles, you'll remember this face. The face of the woman you tried to erase. The silence that followed was deafening. And then, movement. A man from the back began walking toward us, his face cold, his fists clenched. Others shifted, following him, their anger simmering just below the surface. The mob wasn't done. They weren't just going to humiliate us. They wanted to break us. I felt my body go cold. Mariah's hand tightened around mine, and I knew. We were standing on the edge of something dangerous, something we might not come back from. And as they closed in, step by step, I realized this was only the beginning. They came at us like a wave, faces twisted with anger, their footsteps pounding against the polished floor as though the building itself trembled beneath them. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest at a wild rhythm that almost drowned out the sound of their shouts. Almost. Mariah's grip on my hand tightened, her skin clammy, her breath shallow. But her eyes still burned with that quiet fire, even as fear gripped us both. The first man reached us, his hand shooting out toward Mariah's arm. "You don't belong here," he spat. His voice dripping with hate, something primal inside me reacted. Without thinking, I shoved his arm away, my voice tearing from my throat. "Don't touch her!" The room erupted again, louder, harsher. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was violence waiting to spill over. I could see it in their faces, in their clenched fists, in the way they surrounded us like hunters closing in on prey. Daniel stood frozen at the altar, his bride clinging to his arm like a viper, whispering something in his ear that only fueled his paralysis. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't save me. And then, out of nowhere, someone shoved me. Hard. My back slammed against a chair, the sharp edge biting into my spine. Pain shot through me, but adrenaline carried me forward. I staggered to my feet, gasping for breath. My bodice is shaking. Mariah stumbled too, nearly falling, but I caught her before she hit the ground. She looked at me, her lips trembling, and whispered. They won't stop. Her words cut through me, not because they were wrong, but because I knew she was right. The bride's voice sliced through the chaos like a blade. Enough! Throw them out, now! Her command unleashed the mob fully. Several hands reached for us at once. One grabbed Mariah's sleeve, tearing the thin fabric. Another yanked at my arm, their nails digging into my skin. I fought back, thrashing, shoving, clawing. But there were too many voices, too many hands, too much hate. And then it happened. Mariah fell. She was pushed, or pulled. I couldn't even tell. But the next moment she was crashing onto the floor, her body hitting the ground with a sickening thud. The room gasped, a sharp collective breath, but no one moved to help her. No one but me. I dropped to my knees beside her, panic flooding me. Mariah, please get up! Her eyes fluttered open, pain etched across her face, but she managed to whisper, Don't let them win. Tears blurred my vision. My hands shook as I helped her sit up, shielding her with my own body. I could hear the whispers spreading through the crowd now, not just hate, but doubt, uncertainty. Some faces shifted, uncomfortable, realizing the line had been crossed. Others still burned with rage, demanding more. And then Daniel moved. For the first time, he stepped down from the altar, his face pale, his body trembling. For a brief, foolish moment, I thought he was finally coming to our side. But instead, he raised his hands, not to stop the mob, but to calm them. Please, he said, his voice breaking. Don't let this ruin everything. Everything, that's what he called it. Not love, not truth, not justice, just everything. His reputation, his perfect little world, the fragile illusion he had built. My heart shattered in that moment. Whatever love I once had for him dissolved into ashes. He wouldn't save us. He couldn't. So I stood. My voice rose, shaking but unbroken. Look at her, I cried, pointing to Mariah, still on the ground, her strength barely holding. Is this what you call love? Is this what you call family? Hurting someone because she doesn't look like you, live like you, dress like you. You want to talk about shame? The only shame in this room is yours. The room froze. My words sliced through the air, heavy and raw. Some guests lowered their eyes, unable to meet my gaze. Others glared harder, their pride refusing to bend. But then Mariah did something no one expected. She pulled herself up, slowly, painfully, but with a dignity that made the entire hall fall silent. Her torn dress hung off her shoulders, her hair messy, her body bruised, but her eyes shone brighter than anyone's in that room, and in the quiet that followed, she spoke. "You tried to erase me," she said, her voice steady, echoing across the hall. "But I'm still here, and I won't disappear, just because it makes you comfortable." Her words hit like thunder. For a moment, even the bride looked shaken, her mouth opening and closing with no sound. The mob shifted uneasily, the fire in their eyes dimming. And then Mariah turned to Daniel. "You could have stood up for me," she said softly, "but you didn't. And now, you'll remember this moment for the rest of your life." The silence was unbearable. I could feel every heartbeat in that room, heavy and loud. And just when I thought the storm had passed, a single voice broke through. "She's right," someone whispered from the crowd. It was faint, but it was enough. Enough to spark murmurs, to shift the weight of the room. Enough to make people question what they had just done, what they had allowed themselves to become. But even as hope flickered, I knew the damage was already done. The wedding was ruined. The illusion was shattered. And nothing, not the silence, not the whispers, not even the guilt, could erase what had just happened. As I stood there, Mariah leaning against me for strength, one thought carved itself deep into my soul. This wasn't just a wedding. This was a mirror reflecting the ugliness of a world that would rather break a woman than see her as human. And I realized, as the room stared at us with a mix of shame and fear, that this night wasn't just ours anymore. It was everyone's. The hall was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from peace, but the heavy, suffocating silence that follows a storm. The kind that lingers after something irreversibly changes. People shifted in their seats, some avoiding eye contact, others frozen in place, as if unsure what to do next. The fairy tale wedding they came to witness had collapsed into something raw and real. Something they couldn't forget, no matter how hard they tried. I stood there holding Mariah, both of us trembling. Her weight leaned against me, but I knew it wasn't just physical exhaustion. It was the weight of every cruel word, every hateful stare, every unspoken judgment she had carried her whole life. Tonight wasn't just another wound. Tonight was an open scar carved deeper than most. And yet, she was still standing. That realization hit me harder than anything else. They had pushed her, they had torn her down, they had tried with everything in them to make her feel less than human. But here she was, bruised, battered, but unbroken. I whispered softly, more to myself than anyone else, "We're still here." Her fingers tightened around mine. "We always are," she said, her voice barely audible but steady. Daniel finally stepped closer. For a moment, I wondered if he would try to apologize, to say something. Anything, nang, to make sense of what had just unfolded. But the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't regret. It was fear. Fear of the truth now laid bare in front of everyone. He opened his mouth, but I didn't wait to hear his excuses. I didn't need them. There was nothing left to say. I turned away, guiding Mariah toward the exit. Each step felt heavier than the last, but also freer. The air outside hit my lungs like a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. We walked in silence for a long time. The night was cool. The stars scattered across the sky and the city hummed in the distance. Alive. Indifferent. Unaware of the storm we had just survived. After a while, Mariah spoke. Do you think they'll ever understand? I thought about it. About the faces in that room. About the whispers and the shame and the hate that had filled the air. I thought about Daniel and his cowardice, the bride and her cruelty, the strangers who had chosen silence over compassion. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe some of them will. Maybe most of them won't. But this isn't about them anymore. She nodded slowly. It never was. We reached a small park nearby, one of those quiet corners of the city where the world seems to pause. We sat on a bench beneath an old oak tree, and for the first time that night, Mariah allowed herself to cry. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just soft, silent tears slipping down her cheeks as she stared up at the stars. I'm so tired, she whispered. Tired of proving I deserve to exist. Her words tore something open inside me. Because that's what it had always been about. Not just tonight. Not just at that wedding. But every day of her life. The constant need to justify her humanity to people who refused to see it. I reached out and took her hand again. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, I said. Not anymore. She looked at me then. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw something new in her eyes. Not pain, not fear, but strength. The kind of strength that isn't born from victory, but from survival. And in that moment, I realized something else too. What happened that night wasn't just about Mariah. It wasn't just about me. It wasn't even about Daniel or the people in that room. It was about something far bigger. A truth that stretches far beyond one ruined wedding or one act of cruelty. It was about a world that still judges people by the weight of their wallet, the color of their skin, the clothes they wear, the scars they carry. It was about a system that teaches people to hate before they understand, to look away instead of reaching out. It was about the millions of Marias out there, unseen, unheard, dismissed, who deserve to be seen for who they are. And as I sat there beside her, I promised myself something. I promised that I would never stay silent again, that I would tell this story, our story, not because it's dramatic or shocking, but because it's real, because every person deserves to know what it feels like to be treated as less, and every person needs to decide what they're going to do about it. We left that park before sunrise. The world was quiet, the streets still, and yet everything felt different. The anger in my chest hadn't vanished, but it had transformed into something sharper. Purpose. Mariah walked beside me, her steps slow but steady, and even though the night had broken something in both of us, it had all built something stronger. Resilience. Before we parted ways, she turned to me and smiled. A real smile. Small but genuine. Thank you, she said. I shook my head. No, thank you. And then she was gone, disappearing into the early morning light. But not forgotten. Never forgotten. I don't know what happened to everyone else after that night. I don't know if they changed, if they looked in the mirror and saw the ugliness in their own hearts. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they never will. But I do know this. They'll never forget Mariah. They'll never forget the woman they tried to irrigate as the woman who stood in their perfect little world and refused to disappear. And maybe, just maybe, that's how change begins. So I'll leave you with this. How many more times will stories like hers need to happen before we finally decide enough is enough? How many more Marias will it take before the world sees what it's been trying so hard not to see? Because this isn't just her story, it's all of ours.